Hi and welcome back to LDF-Designs. In today's video I'm going to be working with this 6x6 encaustic board panel. It is a cradled panel that they make and manufacture. I've already pre-worked these two panels with some stucco mixture and some stained papers and some fabric, and I had bought these little 2x2 clay board pieces, and I thought it might be fun to adhere those onto these panels using that stucco mixture, so I've done that already. But I wasn't sure how the encaustic would stick to those clay board panels. So this piece I kind of had in mind where I wanted it to go, and that's usually not a super great start for me because it never ends up going the way I want. So this piece gave me a little bit of trouble, but in the end I did really like it. The pictures that you'll see at the end of this video are not how it turned out at the end. So when I was weighting that piece of clay board on there, it squished out some of the stucco mixture, and I apparently missed it and didn't get that scraped off of there when it was still wet. So I have some texture along the edge of that board there that just trying to kind of figure out how to work that in with the encaustic. So the brown areas that you see I did with some staining ink. I sprayed that on there while the stucco mixture was still wet and let it dry, and that's how I obtained those colors there. So I decided to experiment and put the encaustic onto this board to see how it would work. I wasn't sure how it would hold, and as you'll see I go through a whole different set of changes with that little square before it's over with. I will have pictures of this over on my Instagram page so you can see how it turned out if you'd like to do that there. And I'm still not sure if I'm going to leave it how I have it or if I'm going to change it yet, but we shall see. I'm going to sit with it for a couple of weeks and see what I think. At this point the brush was a little bit more dry, we consider it, and so I was just building up the texture, so you can kind of see some of that texture on the surface there. Sometimes that takes a little while to do, so I don't always show it in the videos. And then sometimes I like to put a little heavier wax layer on to create some lines, a little bit of line work, and that's what I'm doing here. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the R&F pigment sticks. So this is an oil paint in the form of a pigment stick. When you don't use them for a little while, they have a little skin that dries on them, and so usually you have to either cut that off, or a lot of times just using a paper towel to peel that off of there will work. And then at this point I realized I wanted to put a few more lines, so I used my tool to do that. A couple of different things I had there on my workbench. But I use this the same way I do the tar or just the regular oil paint out of the tube, putting a little bit on and then again using the vegetable oil. You can use cold wax, you can use linseed oil, coconut oil. Those are all things that you could use if you wanted to spread that around a little bit. But I usually just tend to stick to that handy dandy vegetable oil. So the red pigment is very pigmented, and it took me a little while to work it back to where I wanted it. And I realized at this point it was going to be a little challenging to work around that square and still make it seem like it fit into the piece. So I do struggle with that as I go. I'm trying to give this just a light fuse to hold the texture that I've created. If you overfuse it at this point, then your texture becomes molten and kind of just goes right back down into the surface and becomes flat again. So a lot of people like to work with a real smooth surface, but I usually tend to lean towards a more textured surface, as any of those who have been watching me for a while probably know. Once I fused this, I really wasn't quite sure where to go with it. Plus, I needed that wax to cool and set up. Like I said, I had in mind that I really wanted to make that square a solid color, which I will do here in a couple minutes further into the video. But I do end up, after I shut the camera off, taking that color back off of that square. So at this point, I pulled out that cerulean gray that I have on my palette and started adding a little bit of that to the surface. And from this point on, I really start making some pretty broad changes to the painting. So in this section, I went in and made some pretty neat marks on the surface, which I then will fill with an oil paint. I believe it's a raw umber, and I really like how it looked. However, I do end up covering that up here as we go. So again, you'll have to stick around as this painting goes, because it certainly takes a lot of very different turns. You may remember from a previous video, I have these rollers. They're paint rollers for doing trim, I believe. And I have found out that I really like the shapes that I can make with them. So I dip the end of it into the encaustic and create these kind of round organic shapes. And then again, just taking a little piece of cut off wire, sticking it into the wax, making some random marks. And then I'll be filling those in here with some paint. I also knew that I wanted to add some fabric back to the surface of this, so I had this little piece here that I thought was going to work, but the few times that I tried to kind of lay it on there, I didn't like it as much as I thought I would, so just set that aside and continued to keep working the piece. So I actually had really liked that, but I realized again that where I had fixed that square clay board on there, that area of the painting just wasn't really getting the attention it needed. So I thought maybe I should try to push back some of the texture and stuff that I had just done. So I applied some white encaustic over the top, but immediately as soon as I did it, I realized, oh, I did not like that. That was a wrong move. So at this point, I'm very painstakingly, I didn't put very much of it on camera, but pulling that white paint back off without trying to dig into the texture and the mark making that I had just done. Gave it a light fuse and just trying to sort out which way to go here. So got really crazy and pulled out some yellow that I had and started just applying that all over to the painting. Sometimes as an artist, some of you probably can relate, it's really hard to cover up areas that you like. I struggle with that often. I think I've mentioned it before. But if you find that you are starting to really work around a specific spot on your painting, I've heard some wiser, more practiced artists than I say that when you find yourself doing that, it's probably time to cover that section up and let it go. That can be hard to do, but as you can see, I ended up covering everything up with this yellow paint, but it does go a very good direction. Honestly, right now in my head, I was thinking, I wish I wasn't recording this for everyone to see, because I feel like I'm messing this up. But I just kept working it. Again, heard another really wise person say that if you don't like it, you just need to keep going. So that's what I'm doing here, and I went ahead and took that paint stick, added it onto that clay board. Again, this was another version that I did like. I really liked it, but as I continued to work it, I was concerned that paint wasn't going to set up on that clay board right or correctly. So after I get done shooting this video, I do end up wiping that back off, just because I was concerned about that. So in another really crazy move, I took a very large piece of material and placed it over there on that section of the painting where I had done all the mark making. Then I ended up taking some of my staining inks and adding those onto this. Part of the fabric has encaustic over it and part of it does not, so that will take the ink very differently, and I like the contrast of it. So I'm going to be winding this video down. You'll see here where I end up with it when I turn the camera off, but I did end up going back and doing a few more things to it, and yeah, hopefully you'll enjoy those pictures. Like I said, over on my Instagram page. I thank you very much for watching me work through this today, and can't wait to bring you another video soon. Keep creating out there, and leave me a like or a comment. I do enjoy hearing from you. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, I would appreciate it if you do. Thank you.